I do want to push back a little bit on. I do believe that NATO. I don't think the NATO nor the West has any designs on invading Russia. I can understand why they're threatened, but I do believe that. Let's talk about here we are. Here we are in a land war, and let's be honest with NATO in Ukraine. And my sense is the best way to end this war, quite frankly, is to win it. And that if Russia wants to leave, it's over. And that if they don't leave, or that we come to some sort of accommodation where they get land for invading and killing as many people, obviously a lot of their own people have perished, doesn't that send a green light to autocrats all over the world that they have a strategic advantage or that it's in their best interest to invade their neighbors? I mean, distinct of how we got here, isn't really the only viable way out or the best way out for Western interests and democracies all over the world is to convince the Russians to leave?
Well, they're not going to leave because or let me put it this way. The answer is yes to your question. If we said, if you leave, we don't come in. That's the magic word. If we said, you leave and NATO doesn't enlarge, we have a real chance. That was what was on offer in December 2021. But we said, you leave and we'll do what we want. And that's just not going to happen. That's the problem. So if we said, you leave and we won't enter the gap, I think that is absolutely a viable basis for negotiations. So my point is, in December 2021, Putin was not looking to annex these 4 regions that are now annexed, which made everything much more complicated. Now, mind you, there's also a real complication, and maybe if we have another few hours, we can talk about Crimea, because that actually is a quite complicated subject. But just to say, your basic approach is the one I take, but I add an important footnote, which is, yeah, Russia should go home, but we agree that NATO won't go in. That line I've been urging for years. The White House explicitly won't say it for a real reason, which is that Victoria Nuland has been on this jag for almost 30 years, probably. And certainly, we know from the late 1990s, they want NATO to expand. And here's the point. Obama knew in 2014, he actually gave an interview for which he was heavily criticized. He gave an interview that said, I don't want to get into this more because Russia has escalatory dominance. And what he meant by that is whatever we do, they can take it up a notch, up to nuclear war. And they care about this a hell of a lot more than we do. So I don't want to take the first step and then have my have the pot raised by the Russians, and then we match or raise and go on, because they can keep doing this. They will not allow NATO to expand to Ukraine. To my mind, that's been the story all along.
So, Jeff, you've been generous with your time. I just have one last question. We've kind of done a whirlwind tour geopolitically. I know you speak to a lot of people at the highest levels. So let's do the magic wand question. The president or the White House or Congress only has the bandwidth or the ability to get 2 or 3 things done. What do you think are the most important initiatives that we can take here in the U.S. to ensure not only continued prosperity, but progress?
You know, the key to prosperity is investment. We don't invest enough in this country. Our domestic investment rate, it's not properly measured, but even if you add in the R&D, you add in the fixed investment, and you add in the education spending, it's a shadow of what it should be, because we've got between 1/3 and 1/2 of this country basically outside of the education and even the physical infrastructure increasingly for a prosperous life. And that's where our real issues are. It's a great country. We should invest in it. And that's where we should be putting our public finances. That's where we should be putting our efforts. That's where companies should be devoting their time, not fighting over Ukraine, not having a world war threat over Taiwan, not having 800 military bases around the world, all huge anachronisms. The impressive thing about the United States in the last 30 years, the most positive economic point, and it's a surprise for me if I think back 30 years, we really sustained the technology investments. In fact, not just sustain them, we increase them. And the payoffs have been huge. Our R&D spending is big and wonderful, and it's actually generating huge amounts of new technology. But then we don't invest in the people. We don't invest in basic health care. We don't invest in poor people and poor communities. We don't even have a concept of social housing. I've been spending a lot of time in Vienna this year, which is magnificent and has, 100 years of tradition of social housing. We don't even have the concept right now in this country. And this war stuff is a complete drain. So what I said to the administration at the beginning, though they could care less what I said, but I said, don't do foreign theatrics. Don't get entangled even more. Build this country peacefully. And there's enough for the whole world to have a mutual benefit. Don't break trade, don't break agreements, don't contain China. What a waste of time for us. Let's invest in the United States. So that would be my answer.